Welcome to the FARcast here at Chadron State College. I'm Daniel Binkard here with my co-host Alex Helmbrecht, and we're in a little bit of a different location today. My studio is being worked on a little bit, so we moved over to Alex's office for today's podcast. We've got with us Mike Leite, a professor in the Geosciences program. Mike, great to have you here, and thanks for coming in.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Perfect. First question for you, your background. How'd you get into what you do here in the Geosciences? How'd you end up at Chadron State?
Well, that's a big question. I got here because I've been familiar with this area most of my life, and I knew that this was a place for paleontology. I knew that fossils had been found in this area for many years, last 150 years, and when I learned that, it became fascinating to me. But I grew up in North Dakota, Minot. And I went to college there, and I studied at Minot State, which is a college a lot like Chadron State, a very familiar size and small classes and that kind of thing. So I got to appreciate that kind of a setting there. But I guess I always wanted to go into science when I was a kid.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure what. I mean, I enjoyed taking things apart and putting them back together, So my dad was an auto mechanic. Well, he was a high school teacher. He taught the shop class and auto repair, and he taught me that, first of all, don't ever pay anybody to fix anything. You can do it yourself. Yeah. Just figure it out. Take it apart, put it back together. You could do those with cars back then.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like my beginning. So he taught me not to be afraid of taking things apart. I usually broke them anyway, but you learn about them and you can understand how things work. And it's just pieces, it's stuff that's put together and somebody designed it. And
yeah.
And I guess I could have been an engineer too, but I liked the outdoors, and that was the other part of my upbringing that made me get into geoscience. I didn't think much about geoscience when I was in school. In fact, I had teachers who turned me off on it. Eighth grade physical science teacher was abysmal, and but rather than that being the example of what science was, it was my example of what people can do to science, and just say,
right,
this guy isn't into it, and I was a lot more into it than he was, and so I kind of stayed with it and thought that there'd be some aspect of science that would interest me. When I went to college, I liked geography. I took geography classes, and the geography seemed to me like being, that's kind of cool. I wonder what makes it work.
Right.
And geographers just seem to scratch the surface, literally, and don't go down to what makes it work, and I wanted to know more about it. And I took my first earth science physical geology class, and we did field trips. And we got to go outside and camp and spend weekends in the field and hang out with people who had similar interests. And that was the thing that really hooked it for me, is doing science, outdoors, enjoying the fresh air, going on long hikes, and learning something pretty cool. And that was then I decided at that point that was going to be my calling. But then again, I had a teacher who wasn't particularly inspired by paleontology. He did a decent job of it, but the paleontology wasn't my interest either when I was in college. It was I wasn't sure what I wanted to go into. I thought maybe it could have been geophysics, because I enjoyed physics, but there wasn't until after I graduated. So the oil and gas industry has employed geologists for forever.
Right.
Right. And that was kind of the thing that in North Dakota, oil and gas was a big deal. And so I was employed instantly when I graduated in oil and gas as a mudlogger. And that's what kept me going for a few years. And then I had the opportunity, or I stumbled upon an excavation by paleontologists at the Science Museum of Minnesota in western North Dakota, and they were excavating crocodiles campsosaurs, mammals that look like nothing we have today.
Yeah.
And
The larger, the small kind.
well, they were pretty small back
Okay.
then. They're in the Paleocene. They're
Okay.
just after the age of dinosaurs, and so the mammals are pretty small. But the crocodiles, there were 17-foot crocodiles out there, and so they were impressive. And we don't have crocodiles in North Dakota anymore, and so that also something else about the strangeness of it all. This place right here I'm standing was very different in the past, and that also opened my mind to the kind of things you can discover about a place you live and how things change so drastically in a short period of time.
All right.
And so here I am. I got a job in the oil industry, and I really want to do paleontology. It's kind of like you can't do both. But what I really wanted to do, I really did. So I quit the oil and gas industry, decided to go into graduate school, and ended up going to the University of Nebraska and studied with Mike Voorhees there and looked at the mammals. I studied fossil mammals in the Lake McConaughey area. And that was my master's thesis, and that was a lot of fun. And so I got to do the things I enjoyed doing, work out in the field in the summertime, and discover stuff out there, put together the history of the past, recorded piecemeal by the stuff that's left behind.
Yeah.
That was a good experience. And working with my fellow grad students in Lincoln was really a high point in my life for that time, because it was really, everybody is excited about their science.
Oh, I imagine so.
And everybody's out doing some kind of study, all different on some aspect of it. And so it was a good motivational atmosphere to hang out in.
And did you do your doctoral work at UNL too?
I did not. No, I went straight though into my doctorate program at the University of Wyoming. And so in Nebraska, I worked on Miocene animals. They were 10 to 20 million years old. And then when I went to Wyoming, I went back to my roots, sort of, on the Paleocene and the 60 million year old animals in the Bighorn Basin. And so I went from rhinos and camels and horses and things you could recognize down to these little bitty things that look, like shrews and hedgehogs and squirrels, and they're kind of small and very different.
Oh, yeah.
But the time in North America in the years after the dinosaurs went extinct, the dinosaurs had taken over the planet for 180 million years, and now they're gone. And all these little crawlers that are running around underground, literally out of the way of the dinosaurs, now found themselves in charge. And so there was a flourish of evolution in the Paleocene that was dominated by these small mammals. And that's what's exciting about that time, is that the mammals take off, and they become this kind of a new phase in life on Earth. And so,
well, so when you're out for a hike, and I guess even in the hills south of campus, obviously you know what to look for, but what are some of the I guess the interesting or the cool things that you've found in our region or even on campus? Because I remember I talked to you maybe a couple of years ago. You found like an oreodont. I might be mispronouncing that, but so there's certainly some things. There's some old critters even on our campus.
Oh yeah. There are oreodonts. There are oreodonts everywhere. And so when I first came here, it was 1996 when I first started here, and I had a student at that time, Ed Welch. Actually, a couple of years after I'd been here, he went out. He lived on campus, and he went out in the evenings, roamed around the hills, and he found fossils, and he brought them in. Look what I found. And he ended up having a huge number of fossils on campus. So I got interested in those. We formalized those, and he eventually went on to write a master's thesis on the fossils on campus at the South Dakota School of Mines. And so we've had these fossil localities that have been known. And these are not known. These were known before Ed. Morris Skinner came through here in the 1960s and had discovered fossils on campus. And wherever you have badlands, where you have rocks eroded into gullies, that is going to expose the bedrock, and these rocks tend to have fossils in them. So
what's the primary time period that we find fossils around here?
Well, the fossils on campus, most of the area, including Toadstool Park, are Oligocene.
Okay.
Late Eocene, Oligocene, so they're 42 million years to Miocene in the 20s.
Okay.
And then as farther south you go, the younger the rocks are. But 30 million years old is the general age of the fossils on campus.
Okay.
And so we had I've had several students through the years that have taken the fossil localities on campus as a starting point for senior theses and general research.
Well, that's great to have this learning library or learning laboratory right in our backyard.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm thinking about how many colleges in the world have these fossils on campus.
Yeah.
Or even rocks that are worth looking for fossils.
Yeah.
And not many.
What are some of the things that you found?
Well, you can't walk without hitting an oreodont, right? They're all over. It must have been an amazing time with oreodonts running around like sheep on the landscape.
And so those are basically like the domestic sheep?
They look a lot like sheep.
Okay.
They're about the size of sheep. They have more primitive teeth, but they were teeth that are adapted for grazing or eating soft vegetation. And so then we see rhinos. We see a couple species of rhinos, and we see camels. And there's a pretty wide diversity of camels in the rocks we have around here. People don't think of camels as being a North American animal, but they really are. They started here, and they branched out into their various size groups and adaptations, and then they eventually made it over into Asia and Africa, and that's where they live today as refugia, but they went extinct in their homeland, and that's here. But besides camels, well, horses, of course. There was a time when there was probably 6 or 7 different species of horses running around the Great Plains. And, how do they tell each other apart? Well, obviously they had different colors, they had different calls, they had different behaviors we don't know about. Opens up all kinds of interesting ecological questions.
Yeah.
And of course, carnivores. There's dogs and cats, wolf-like animals, saber-tooth cats, and large and small, and weasels, insectivores, rodents. Large diversity of rodents are found, and rabbits, of course.
That's great variety.
And you'd recognize most of these animals 30 million years ago.
Right.
You'd say a little bit funny looking. Rabbits would be small, and I'm sure the animals would have outward appearances we can't imagine, but
Yeah, at least roughly speaking, similar to what we know today.
yeah.
Certainly recognize the saber-tooth tiger.
Oh, yeah.
You know you want to run away.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty large, weren't they?
Yeah. Yep.
So, Mike, changing gears on that, you've got, I understand, an upcoming presentation at the Nebraska Academy of Sciences. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. In fact, that is a branch of what we were just talking about, fossils on campus, because there is the presentation is describing a fossil wolf that we found on campus and some other fossils related to it. And Steve Welch, who is working on a master's degree here, had discovered that about a year ago in one of the canyons on campus,
Nice.
just outside of, just off the trails up there. And, he's digging in the relatively soft, unconsolidated, gravelly fill. It's definitely not bedrock. It's some very much younger stuff. It's sort of clinging to the side of these canyons. And we're interested in it from that perspective. What is this? How old is this? And how long have these canyons been here? And they keep filling in and getting recut. So the Pine Ridge really has this dynamic history we're still trying to figure out. So that's kind of like the foundation of why we're collecting fossils in the first place, is because the rocks that the fossils were found in are deposited in the topography, and the topography keeps changing, and the Pine Ridge keeps eroding away, but never quite eroding away.
Yeah.
And so he found the wolf. He found one of the jaws. We went out there and poked out a little bit and found the other jaw, and there are two beautiful, pristine lower jaws. And then we found pieces of a turtle and part of a long bone that had broken off. And so kind of a scrappy bunch of stuff, but definitely a identifiable bone there.
Yeah.
And he found some more stuff near Briggs Pond also that is we thought was similar and probably related to the same fill. We found that was not correct.
Well, still, I mean, there's going to be some swings and misses probably when you're digging.
Well, yeah, sure. You take you make a hypothesis about something and then you test it, and didn't work. So the hypothesis was that there's canyons here that were cut, and they're filled up by this. It looks like landslide deposits, basically. It's not organized stream deposits or anything. And then so the fossils there are just kind of like happen to be caught in that, and so now we can use them as the indicator of what happened. And the other story of that is the bone was in good enough shape. We were able to get a radiocarbon date on it at 700 years, approximately.
All right.
So that's relatively new in
That's
your line of work.
historical.
Just yesterday.
Yeah.
That is, yep. And so you can actually talk about, what our ancestors were doing in Europe at the time, and that's definitely a very young date. We never expected anything that young, considering the fact that this canyon was cut and then filled up and then cut again after that.
And when you say a canyon is cut, what do you mean by that?
Well, so we have these gullies. Maybe they're gullies. They're small canyons, but they're places that a stream has flowed through and removed the material and so left a steep-sided canyon there. And so streams go through, they run off the Pine Ridge, they got a lot of gradient, and they remove the sand and gravel, carry it down to town. And then climate changes or something happens, and then sand, gravel, landslide deposits start filling the stuff in again, and it vegetates over. And then something happens again, and canyons cut through. So it's a cut and fill. The landscape is changing constantly.
Yeah.
So water and time.
Water and time, yep.
It's funny. It's not all it seems to take.
You almost want to put a camera up there and do the stop motion video.
Oh, yeah, the
and
extreme
watch it
time
sustain.
lapse.
Yeah. If you could put a camera up for 1,000 years, you'd see an amazing amount
Oh, absolutely.
of change.
Yeah, that would be something. Now, Mike, most people may not know, but your office and where you teach, primarily when you're not outside, is the math science building. Well, that's going through a renovation, and then there's going to be an addition added on to that as well. And so I believe starting next academic year in the fall, the math science building is going to be closed. And so all of those classes need to go somewhere. Your offices need to go somewhere. So do you know where you're going to be teaching next year, or where your offices are going to be located?
My office will be in room 128, Brooks Hall, and so that's where I'm going to be sitting. We've got a row of former dormitory rooms upstairs in that building that are going to be used for storage of all rocks and fossils and stuff that were taken out of the science building.
Because you would need to take those out of the Cook Museum too, right?
And the stuff that's on exhibit needs to be moved. And
Yeah.
that's going to be, we're having a last bash party, we're calling it, Out with the Old on April 3rd, Friday, which is going to be a building open house, going to be museum tours, planetarium tours. Tawny Tibbetts is going to have her students in there doing planetarium tours. We're going to have Matt Brust showing his insect collection and Steve Rolfsmeyer showing the herbarium, all of which is going to be packed up and moved the week after that. So we're inviting people out to come and.
And is that all day?
No, it's 7 to 9 p.m.
Okay.
One last chance to get the planetarium show and see the rocks before they get changed over in the new location.
Yeah.
And, what would it be, a year and a half, 2 years?
Hopefully,
At least probably 2 years before the museum's back in order. The Triceratops, the mounted skull we call Sarah, is going to be moving over to the Sandoz Center, and it's going to be in the atrium, in the area behind the fence. And so that's one of the exhibits, and we have places for a few other things that are going around, library and student center. But most of the stuff will be packed up, put away, and then we have to come up with new exhibits when we get in the new space.
And that, so the you're referencing the Eleanor Barbara Cook Museum, who was one of, well, I don't think she was original to the college, but very early on a teacher here.
Yeah.
And much of that collection was it her own items? Or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So the Eleanor Barbara Cook collection comprises her teaching specimens, and she had specimens. So her father was E.H. Barbour, who founded the University of Nebraska State Museum. So he'd been in Lincoln for quite a few years. And she got a job here in 1924. She may have been here earlier in 23 with her husband teaching classes, Harold Cook. And so she was here and brought her specimens with her. And the word is that she, asked her father for help in putting together stuff she could use in the classroom. And so he had connections all over the world in museums. And so they donated things that they had that they were not using or they had duplicates of, and gave them to her. And so we have a beautiful collection of minerals and rocks that were her personal things. And so even though some of them aren't really the most wonderful things, they have her number on them. And so I kind of hold those in a special place, right?
Sure.
They're kind of using a rock that's been in the collection for 100 years, even though I just did that last week. I had a fossil leaf, and I said, hey, this is Eleanor's leaf.
Yeah.
And so there's a nice connection with the past there. And so those are being saved. We're going to probably put those out as a major part of the exhibit in the new space. We'll have a lot more exhibit space than we have now.
No, that's going to be good. From what I saw in the most recent plans, it looks like it'll be a pretty prime location along with the herbarium.
It will.
So that'll be nice to see when it's all done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, all the west wing that has storage and mechanical room in now will be museum space. And so the herbarium will be across the way from the Geology Museum. And we're looking forward to filling that. It's kind of a daunting task thinking about all the space we need to fill, but it'll be a great opportunity.
Oh, definitely. So, Mike, I want to talk a little bit about what your teaching philosophy is. You've been honored with the college's Teaching Excellence Award and honored with the Nebraska State College System's honor, too. Tell us a little bit about how you approach teaching.
Well, I mean, what showed up in the award and was named as, the reason I got the award was high impact practices, and that was kind of like the buzzword back then, probably still is. High impact means that you get the students' attention, they'll enjoy doing what they're doing, and they take something away from that experience, and so they've learned. That's even more relevant today when everything's electronic and everything's connected. How do you surpass that? How do you get above the fact that information is instantly available. Well, you put people in a setting where they are confronted with solving a problem and they have to figure it out from the pieces of the world around them, and that's that's high impact teaching. And so you can't teach geoscience without high impact teaching. It's just basically,
Sure.
If it's on paper, you're not really teaching it. They're not really learning it. So I guess that's the thing. Anybody who's ever taught geoscience is going to teach high impact. That's
Just part of the gig.
part of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
It seems to be the only thing that works.
You got to get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
Mike, can you give us an elevator speech or a short rationale for why the world needs geoscientists? And then what are some of the jobs that your graduates are going into?
Yeah, so my elevator speech for a very short building is the if you enjoy living on Earth, you need geoscientists.
That works.
That because name something that you use that you can appreciate. Like resources, water, energy, clean air, farmland, food, all that stuff. There's a geoscience approach behind it somewhere. And probably not very far behind it. That's the thing that, it pays the bills. It gets the food on the table. It makes us happy. Gives us high quality of life. It maintains our health. It's part of human health is having good nutrition and good resources and all the things we take for granted as part of the modern technological world. So that's at the root of almost everything we need. The things my students go into are related to those resources, and so a lot of people get jobs in water resources. We have several students working in natural resource districts around Nebraska who are maintaining water quality in various ways. We have people working in private consulting in environmental fields, looking for ways to mitigate water quality issues mostly, and dealing with both contamination and supply of water. We have quite a few people. I could name several students who are working in the oil and gas industry. And the push is toward green energy and away from fossil fuels, but this is the economy that runs on fossil fuels still.
Right.
And so we still need people to go into oil and gas. This is not a dead-end field. And eventually people who work in oil and gas work for companies like Shell and ExxonMobil are going to be figuring out ways to diversify and get into green energy too. And so those will be things for the future. Let's see, what else? I have a student working for a windmill company, the old-fashioned water pumping windmill, and they're another industry that's old-fashioned but diversifying into modern fields as well. So there's lots of industries out there, private and public, that are employing geoscientists. And I haven't said anything about paleontology because having grown up in paleontology as the thing that really got me started, realizing that there's few jobs in the field, and if you're going to make it in paleontology, you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to claw your way to the top and fight your way through the competition in order to do it. And some people are willing to do that, some people are not. And my job, I'm not here as a paleontologist, I'm here as a generalist, right? And I teach all the geoscience courses. And so that's why I'm able to do what I can here. Research is a very tiny part of my job. And, I deal with water resources and structural and sedimentology and volcanoes and a whole bit because that's what I have to do.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So The geoscience program here is kind of unique. We have almost completely online, except for the summer field portion. So how does all that work, especially considering the need for that high-impact learning practice?
Yeah, well, you mentioned field camp. That's it. That's
Yeah.
the high-impact learning that makes it possible. And, if you want to say, you could say this is not an online program because it has field camp in it. Well, the other criticism is you can't do an online geoscience. I have to agree with that. You can't do online geoscience and make it give students what they really need to be able to recognize the problems and solve problems when they get out in the real world. Maybe you could do it. For someone who really has the motivation,
Right.
and wants to learn about how to solve problems in the field, they probably could do it. And certainly there are ways to there are data sets involving field data that somebody else has collected that need to be analyzed. I'm thinking maybe someone who was handicapped, for example, couldn't actually physically get out in the field. I mean, there's
Right.
a possibility that person will be able to solve some problems. Because we have so much data out there, there's so many different areas where our data has been collected and has just accumulated and is available on the internet. There's more problems to solve than there are people to solve them. And so that's one of the ways I say that hypothetically you could be a geoscientist and access these data sets. Having said that, somebody has to need to collect the data in the field, right? We have to have somebody going out there and actually do that field work. And so with the combination of online classes and then summer field camp, we take all of our students, not just the online students, face-to-face and online. They meet each other and I get to meet them, and then they're faced with increasingly difficult problems in the field, go out and solve those, and then they feel good about what they've accomplished, and we move on to the next year in the classroom.
So is that be every summer throughout their, say, 4 years in the program they meet
Yes.
up? Okay.
Field camp is 3 years,
Okay.
two credits per 2 weeks, 2 credits each time, and then they have 6 weeks of field camp at the end. Most colleges have a 6-week capstone field camp, or at the end of their career, between their junior and senior year, they go out in the field for 6 weeks, and then they're confronted with all these problems. Here, you've read about this, now figure it out.
Yeah.
I think it's a little unfair. I mean, that's field camp I took when I was an undergraduate, but it's unfair to throw students in that setting without having prepared them.
Yeah.
So you still have to have field preparation. Our field camp has a different approach, is that field preparation, sometimes the only experience they get in the field is in field camp, right? Because they start out as freshmen. They read about rocks in the field, and next May they're out in the field looking at them, and that's and we help them a little bit more. We hold their hands a little bit more and ease them into that. Plus, our field camp is like a one-room schoolhouse, in that the students who've been there for 3 years can help the students who are just starting out.
Oh, that's good.
And that is, I think, one of the advantages. And it's also the advantage of having small classes and having people from at different levels together. It's they can help teach each other a little bit.
Definitely.
Sounds like a great learning environment with some community aspects to it mixed in there too.
It is, yeah. And field camp is really does great things for the interaction, I think, in my classes, because once a student has been in the field and then they post an online assignment, I see their face, right? I know I can expect what this person, I can hear what this person is saying, I can see where they're struggling, and I can see their particular approach to the problem because I've worked with them in the field on that. It's amazing what you can do in 2 weeks, but it's intensive 24 hours a day sitting there with the students.
I bet. Mike, what are some of your interests outside of work?
Well, my outside interests. So Nancy and I bought a house here when we first moved to town, and we've been fixing up the house. And so I like to say all my extra time is spent fixing fences, and it's kind of like it takes a lot of time. Fixing fences. We gather firewood and we go out places and collect firewood on weekends. But being outdoors and being able to keep in shape by doing work on the ranch is good. Yeah. That's what we enjoy doing, and I enjoy bike riding as well. And kind of stuff don't get as much time as we wish we could do, but going biking and hiking and camping and exploring the wilderness is
it's a great area
real,
for it.
Yeah. It is, yeah. We're kind of in the middle of a lot of things here. We're close by.
Nice.
Yeah. So, Mike, we've come to the end for our quick-hitting questions for you to wrap things up. First question, a favorite book or author?
Well, I guess Neil deGrasse Tyson is kind of like my hero right now. I mean, Carl Sagan used to be, Asimov used to be a favorite of mine when I was a kid. And Stephen Jay Gould also. These are all people who were scientists, right? And they all do their best explaining science to the public. And what I think they do is really important because people need to understand science.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because science is telling them what to do all the time. It's saying you got to cut down on your fossil fuels. You're going to do this and do that, and making people a little bit self-conscious about their behaviors and why do we do that? Why do we think it's important? So Neil deGrasse Tyson is a great explainer, and he has a big following, and he's very personable and doesn't mind going on national talk shows and helping spread that message.
Mike, what's one of the more satisfying digs that you've been a part of?
Well, I guess probably. Starting out when you're a youngster in your 20s, the experiences are more intense, right? And going out in the field and collecting these big crocodiles, that was pretty intense.
That'd be cool.
And being able to watch them appear in the museum a few years later,
right.
And it's kind of cool to be able to do that. So that was a great learning experience. And in fact, the fossils we have in the collection here, the ones you don't see, the ones behind the scenes are really. I can imagine all the work that went into collecting those through the years. Mostly by not me, other people, and those are really personal experiences embedded into all those. Those are really kind of great. It's always your heart speeds up a little bit once you see a fossil in the ground.
I bet.
How many states have you been to?
Oh, not all of them. I guess maybe 40.
Not bad, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I've been in all the western states except for Alaska and Hawaii, and I've missed most of the Deep South, going from Alabama, Mississippi up through. I guess I've been in North Carolina, but
that's a good number.
Yeah.
How many times have you been to the top of Sea Hill? You're probably going to have to guess.
Yeah, so I've been there, 3 or 4 times a year, 50 to 100 times.
That's a good number.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. All right, last one for you. What is a word that comes to your mind when you think of Chadron State?
I think of quality. I think of the quality we have here. The faculty are amazing, and we teach amazing students. Yeah. And we see these light bulbs shine, come alive, and students who really have the motivation, the background, and the courage to learn stuff that's hard to learn.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of energy and a lot of motivation. It really pays off, and I've seen every faculty member I've talked to on campus has that understanding that, I know those students, here they are, and I'm just trying to get these guys to wake up, and when they wake up, then they're on their own.
Yeah.
I think of my students as Energizer bunnies. Sometimes you put the batteries in them and they go off and they're off doing great stuff.
Yeah.
And some of them don't, but there's a lot of positive that goes on here.
Yeah, we got plenty of success stories, that's
Yep.
for sure.
Yep.
All right. Well, Mike, thanks for coming on the show with us. We really appreciate having you here.
It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Thanks.